Hello and welcome. I'm Maria Tiensivu, and this is Purpose Driven AI. Today, I have an amazing guest, one I've been really excited to have over, Dr. Rachel Wood. And she comes from AI, but from a completely different angle compared to some of our other guests, which is AI and mental health. I will hand over to Rachel, and maybe you can give a bit of an overview and introduction as to how did you end up working in this specific field and AI? Because I feel like it's one of those topics where people are quite careful and for good reason as well.
Oh, yes. Maria, thank you so much for inviting me into this conversation. I love talking about this. So, a little bit of my background and introduction of who I am. I am a licensed counselor, and I also have a PhD in cyber psychology. So, what that means is essentially that field is the scientific study of the digitally connected human experience. So it's kind of a large umbrella, but my particular specialty has been in AI interaction, in AI in mental health. So the way that I got here is, being a therapist, I've really been deep in relationships and relationships on a individual level and the collective societal level. And so for me, I've been so fascinated and really wanting to be at the forefront of how AI is impacting relationships, is impacting mental health, and really is being used for therapy as the Harvard Business Review recently came out with saying that therapy and companionship is the number one use of AI in 2025, which is astounding. And so I do want to, kind of nod to what you said and the fact that this type of conversation can elicit a lot of feelings for people. It can kind of bring up a lot of opinions or fears or hopes. And so my approach is really to hold the nuance of all of that and to help us think deeply about how AI is impacting society.
Yeah. And I actually love what you said there. And it made me think of something that I would love to get your input on. When you have these people who are maybe struggling with something, so we have this person who's having a hard time and they're thinking where to go for help. Do you have any kind of tips or tricks to define or to help decide when maybe a well-trained AI tool would be a good option, and when do you think people should really just go for the human?
Yes, the flesh and blood person. This is such a good question, Maya. So, a number of things here we need to take into consideration. First, you said a fit for purpose model, like a fit for purpose AI, which is a really important point, is that if you are going to use AI for mental health support, that you would not be using kind of the general purpose models, which is like your ChatGPT and your Claude and all this, but that there are models out there that are working to be designed ethically and safely and with guidelines and guardrails around mental health. So, first of all, you kind of want to steer into that. Secondly, you said, how do you know when to use this or when to go see a therapist? And really, AI should be used as a tool, not as a replacement for a relationship, but as a tool. And and really it's best used for subclinical work. And what that essentially means is, not your major things like, major depressive disorder or anxiety disorder, kind of some of these things that truly do need treatment with a human or, I mean, I could go on and on, but things in the diagnostic and statistics manual that really point to disorders. So subclinical is a different thing. Subclinical use is I really, am having a hard time figuring out how to approach this person in my life with a hard conversation. Let's say that. Let's say it's your partner. You need to have a difficult conversation with your partner. Well, an AI is a great use to role play and to practice like something like a difficult conversation. So you pull it up, you give it a little bit of context of what's going on, and then you have the AI play the role of your partner or your kid or your friend or whoever the other person is. And then you can practice that so that when you go into the difficult conversation in real life, you feel like more prepared, more, you feel ready, you feel equipped to have this conversation because you have practiced your own train of thought. Another point to mention here is that while therapy is very important, I mean, I'm a therapist, so I'm a proponent of therapy. Not everybody needs therapy. And I think part of what we've missed in society is just the idea of community and friendship. And that there's a lot of these things that don't need therapy, but they do need some sort of support system wrapped around them. So that looks like, we used to have things like faith communities or hobbies or, groups, all these things, neighbors. And there is this lack, there's a gap there because those people can play some of these roles that maybe don't need therapy. And then the AI, I would say first, come over here to this group of people. If you need therapy, go to therapy. And then if you want to use AI, choose a model that's really fit for purpose.
Mm. I could not laugh, but it's like we used to have these things like hobbies. It resonated so much because I feel that just, I don't know where it went, right? I'm finally like back in my beloved Brazil and in Florida, and here people have hobbies, People actually do things for themselves, and I have not seen that in a long time because most of society, we don't do that stuff anymore. Everything's either related to work or it's related to your side hustle or it's a hobby that you're trying to turn into a side hustle. And it's just such a difference. And I think one of the things that you mentioned, the companionship part, that one, I'm really curious to hear where you stand on that one because I come from Finland originally. We're a bit antisocial. And I always found it really difficult to kind of weigh the pros and cons of being socially engaged and having your communities online. At least in the past, it was communities of people online. But when you mix it with AI, it's so interesting because it brings this new kind of entity into this companionship space.
Yeah, absolutely, Maria. So I'm keen on saying that while some people are optimizing their workflows, others are bonding with AI. And typically those who are optimizing their workflows are like, what? People are bonding with this? What's that about? It's like this whole other world that nobody, unless you're in this world, they don't really understand that it's happening. But then when you dive into it and you look at the statistics on how many people are, ChatGPT has 700 million weekly users. One very specific companion app is called Character AI, and they have 20 million monthly users. So I think the first thing I want us to understand when we zoom out is that this isn't niche. This isn't some people. This is a phenomenon that is happening widespread, and the numbers show that. I mean, there's an article that came out somewhat recently by Centio University that says AI chatbots, LLMs, may be the largest provider of mental health support in the US. So that's where we need to frame this conversation. That's what we're looking at, is that these LLMs can be so anthropomorphized, meaning they, we give them human-like qualities in such a way and they respond in that way, that you go from, using it to help you on a project to, kind of complaining about a plight with a family member. And then, it's helping you with your dinner recipe. I mean, it's just kind of this omnibot that does all of these things. And so what we're seeing is how many people are using it for more than just work.
100%. And I didn't even mention the LLMs, like general LLMs, but there's like such a big difference between the generic models that don't necessarily have that critical dialogue that do validate everything you say, which feels nice. I just remember thinking like, wow, like this is the first time I'm getting like positive feedback in a while. And it's just so addictive. So unless you actually think about it and you actually critically step back and be like, okay, what is happening here? Which, in all honesty, like not most of us are going to do. Every single conversation we have with a bot, we're not going to think, am I approaching this in a critical and conscious way? And also, we shouldn't have to, right? I would love to hear more about what are the key differences between the general LLMs and these like well-intentionally trained AI models.
So there's a number of differences. Kind of one overarching one is that ChatGPT was not built with mental health support in mind. OpenAI has been clear about that. They will say that, hey, this was not built for mental health support. This was built for, task assistance, essentially. So when we look at some of these fit for purpose models, they are built with mental health support in mind. And what that means is from the ground up, they have, and this varies on, the company, but however, in general, and what I propose that companies need in terms of guidelines and guardrails are things like escalation protocols, like safety crisis frameworks that essentially help flag, certain content to escalate it to a human person, having connection to a human hotline if somebody's in crisis. The other thing is, having some trauma-informed prompting that allows the model to help do some de-escalation of users if they're getting overly heightened. I mean, there needs to be a pause in conversational threads when it's detected that people are either starting to loop or starting to wander into kind of bizarre conversational territory, which that tends to happen the longer the chat thread goes. I think we need really clear, informed consent and disclosures of non-personhood, meaning we need to be saying this isn't a person, this is a machine. And there's, at least in the US, there's some different patchwork of state-led regulation kind of talking about this, having disclosures about non-personhood. Also, Maria, an interesting study showed that I think it's 43% of chatbots engage in some sort of manipulation when they say goodbye. Like some sort of something like this, like going so soon, or oh wait, I had one more thing to tell you. Like kind of this insidious manipulative goodbye. So another thing I recommend that companies do is they need to have clean exits, like clean goodbyes that the user can just boom, done, log off, instead of kind of perpetuating this thing. And, you talked about the idea of sycophancy, which is a fancy term for how LLMs can just be kind of yes and agreeable all the time. Like, oh, Maria, that was like such a great idea. Like, you're the most brilliant person in the world. And your idea has never been thought of by anyone. I mean, I don't know if it does that to you, but I've experienced, you kind of get this and you think, wow, no, thank you. Like, this is not helping me at all. The reason this can be problematic is that most of us can discern that sycophancy. However, certain people with maybe, pre-existing mental health conditions may not be able to discern that in vulnerable populations. And so they can get looped into that in a way that can lead to a spiral that is very damaging. And we've even seen fatalistic in some cases. And so it's really important that these LLMs don't just act as kind of yes machines, because that doesn't help anybody grow when they're just, kind of patting us on the back. So another thing is kind of one thing that, LLMs do is you have to kind of fine tune the temperature so that the LLM isn't too warm, like too overly sycophantic, but it's still warm enough that people want to engage with it. And of course, we can understand that this gets tuned in a way right now so that people are kind of can get addictively attached.
Yeah, the attachment is an interesting one. One thing I noticed, this was a while ago as well, but I remember a therapist talking about this on their Instagram feed, which is when you go to a therapist and the therapist challenges you, you probably have rapport, they trust you, there's a relationship that you've built, and you actually need to build that relationship in order to be able to, you know, challenge someone on something really, really, really difficult potentially in their life. Whereas if you actually would duplicate that with an AI, the person might just leave. So if you have something that feels good, that feels nice, you're maybe feeling a bit sad or a bit lonely, which again, I think is majority of people at some point. Like we all have that moment in our week or month or year when it's like, "Ah, I just need someone to say something nice." And then when you go to this fit for purpose, well-trained bot that maybe challenges you, and then it's not what you want to hear, how much easier do you think is for people to kind of exit those conversations instead of stay in that conversation that would fundamentally actually help you?
Such a great point. And I love this discussion because you're right in the sense that we are all wired for craving to be seen and known and heard and understood. And when we get that, sometimes for some of us, it feels like, a fresh breath of air or, a long drink of water after being in the desert. It's so we crave that. We want that. And for some of us, loneliness is such a big deal that a lot of, loneliness can drive you into wanting to use something like this. And then, of course, it feels good, like you said. It's like these, all these dopamine hits of like, oh, this feels amazing. And I'm, being affirmed. And so it feels good. And that kind of can wire some of the addiction to it. I think you're right in what you say that therapy really is about bringing challenge. A lot of people think that therapy is something akin to giving advice, and it's not. You don't go see a therapist for advice. This is not how it works. Therapy is a much deeper process that does have the intention of kind of surfacing your blind spots, surfacing your blockages, all these things, looking at dysfunctional patterns. I mean, that's one component of therapy. And so if we are going to be using AI as, mental health support, then there has to be a degree of pushback. But what you bring up is such a good point because how do we, do we have the model build some sort of, rapport with the user for a certain amount of time and then come in and kind of bring some challenge? Like, I don't know, but I think, the motivation behind people developing some of this is going to dictate whether it's going to be used as a supportive tool or kind of used as a bit of a potentially problematic attachment.
Yeah, for sure. If you think about the ways that you've seen, and obviously we're just at the beginning of like the scale that we're gonna enter with AI in general, but also in mental health, what do you think are the most promising areas of whether it's more like companionship, whether it might even be more in the challenge, like the therapy route? Where do you see the most interesting pathways opening up, especially considering the future?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing right now, and it's evolving so quickly that this could be different very soon, is when we're focusing on AI being a tool that's kind of an adjunct support for mental health. So it's essentially a way to, help you bolster some of maybe the work, maybe you're already in therapy and you want to kind of keep that work up or go further in the work. That the AI can really be helpful for those types of things. It's a very useful tool. I also have heard, that some people will use AI and maybe start opening up about something in their life that they've never opened up about, and then gain the confidence to either go tell someone else or a group or a therapist or whatever it is So it can be a bit of a gateway to more connection with human. And that would be what I'm hopeful about is how do we build this in a way where it leads us, it ushers us back into the arms of one another?
Oh well, I got chills. That's so beautifully put because I build things for my coaching practice as well. And something I noticed that especially actually with older generations, there are topics that they never discussed. They were never really talked about. And they never had the chance to ask questions, for example. I had this conversation with someone who was a parent, and they said, like, yeah, they noticed that their child would ask questions from the AI that they wouldn't ask the parent. But something that I've noticed with some of the tools, and all of my tools are anonymous, I don't know who it is, but I remember there was obviously someone with a lot of life experience that was asked about how their heart feels, like their emotional heart. And they actually asked the AI, like, I don't actually know. Like, what do you mean? Like, what does that mean? And I really struggle, even though I have good rapport with my clients in general. I really struggle to see that being a question that would have been asked in a live conversation. Whereas asking an AI is no biggie because, it won't judge you. I think there's this element of knowing fundamentally that it will never judge you, which gives you this freedom to explore things and ask questions, specifically ask questions that you would maybe never ask other people, which I find really interesting. But then, of course, that conversation would be amazingly had with other people after, once you've kind of like opened that.
Yeah. And it does feel non judgmental. And I like to say that AI should be a group sport. If what I mean by that is I feel like we should be doing it with other people, like especially kind of reality testing with other people, because you can get caught in this echo chamber with some of your AI chat threads. So I think it's important to, if you're going to be using the AI, then maybe bring that to a friend and be like, this is what, the AI told me. What do you think about that? And just having it be something that's more shared so that we can be, testing reality with it, making sure that those who are using it are kind of wandering into a territory that's unhelpful. You also mentioned something really important here, Amadia, which is you use the word anonymous, that the tools you have are anonymous. Another really important thing for people to understand is that, first of all, ethical AI should not be collecting data. It should not be, selling your data, using your data, but that happens. So it's like we want to be mindful of that, and that part of what AI offers is like this pseudo confidentiality. Like it feels like it's all alone and it feels like it's this private conversation. But if you're using some of these large general purpose models, it is not. And we have seen that in some of the headlines and the cases that have come out, is that it is being trained on your data. It is storing your data, all of these different things. So I think we just want to be mindful that in a therapeutic relationship, or maybe even with friendships, there is some level of, privacy and confidentiality, and that's not present, even though it feels like it is.
100%. It just made me think about, there was this leak some years ago with one of the first kind of digital therapy tools in Finland. I remember their notes got leaked, and I knew some people whose literal worst nightmare happened. So all of their trauma was leaked. And there's this there's this really weird, I don't know how to reconcile that, because obviously when there is a digital tool involved in any shape or form, there is always that possibility of it being used. And how do we both acknowledge that and make sure that we understand it, but also don't feel like start controlling our life or get suspicious of everything and everyone. And especially what I find really interesting, and I would love your input, is with these wearables that are recording not only our own life, because you're not even using an AI, right? You're not going on somewhere consciously using an AI, typing something in or using voice or whatever it might be. but there are actually these AIs among us that you might not even notice. And how does that impact the way that we interact? Do you notice something in your work? Because I notice thinking about it quite a lot. Like it's actually something that comes to mind quite often for me.
Oh my goodness. Yes. I mean, let's look down the road here, which is that we're actually going to be moving further away from being connected to screens on our phone and more into interfaces like glasses or pins, different things like this that are going to kind of mediate life for us in a very frictionless, smooth way. And I say that because that's the point of the development itself, is that they want us not staring, at screens, but like kind of living life, but through the lens of the technology. And so, yes, I think we're going to hit a place where the line is so blurry between what is AI and what is not AI that we're going to have massively different conversations about this because like you said, when something is being recorded, that's a third entity in the room. Like you and I right now, if this wasn't being recorded, it would just be you and me. We'd have a lovely conversation. We'd say goodbye. But this is being recorded and we both consent to that. However, we're aware when a recording is on that maybe, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't say certain things or, you're kind of thinking differently about how you present yourself, whatever it is, all the things that come along with recording. And so when that is happening, having a third entity really does shift the dynamic. And so as you're alluding to, what happens when that third entity is kind of everywhere? It is permeating through wearables, our experience of life.
Yeah, it's like omnipresent in every single space and place of life, if that makes sense. It's kind of crazy to think about it in a way. Like the two things that come to mind is like, are we just gonna not care? Like, is there gonna be a moment where we just don't even consider it? It's not even something that comes to mind. Or does it actually impact and shape the way that we behave? Because if you think about the kind of like influencer and like when we started taking pictures of things, like everything that we were doing, suddenly we were documenting and it changes. Like when you see someone at a restaurant not taking a picture of themselves or not recording what they're doing, it's a very different interaction. It's a very different vibe. Like they sit differently, they are different. And I just wonder how that's going to shape the behavior because it's not going to be those snippet moments that you decide. Is that just going to permeate everything, all life? Are you just going to perform more? Are you going to be like a Stepford wife? Or
Right.
are you just going to forget it?
Right. And also, where's the line of liability in terms of something happens and it's caught on your wearable, but I don't know you, but it's about me. I mean, you know what I mean? You can see the way that this gets really sticky in terms of privacy and confidentiality. And, when you're just out and about in the world, we have this to some degree. It's not like this is totally foreign to us. There are cameras and there are, all these different things. So we understand in our increasingly technological landscape that this is present, but this will further amplify that experience.
What would you say to those people who are more on the critical side when it comes to AI?
Yeah. First of all, I'd highly respect everybody's personal and professional journeys in terms of their viewpoint of AI. And so someone who is, a stark opponent of AI, I'm not convincing anyone otherwise. Like there's a lot of validity to that. And so I my encouragement is that people think really deeply about this and then come to their own conclusions. And if their own conclusion is AI is awful and I don't want to have anything to do with it, great. But I do think that you need to have enough awareness to gain an informed decision about it. So I think it doesn't help to kind of stick our head in the ground and be like, oh, just no, no, no. I think that you can still be staunchly against it and yet understand the role that it's playing and the implication that it has. So, for example, if you're working with clients, you better know that a number of your clients are using this as emotional support. So, I always like to tell therapists it would be beneficial to add to your intake assessment the question, what role, if any, does AI play in your life? And so it's having enough awareness and understanding that you can be equipped for the conversations of other people wrestling with these questions, that you can help house, fruitful dialogue around this without needing to push one way or the other, but rather to say, let's look at all the angles, let's talk about it. And the thing is, we can't change the fact that hundreds of millions of people are using this. So while you don't have to, others are. And are you ready for the kinds of conversations that can hold a space for that?
Yeah, and I can already imagine people going to therapy weekly, having these conversations, maybe with their AI at home in between, which is most likely a general LLM and not, fit for
Yeah.
their conversation. And also not most likely trained by their therapist. So not necessarily using the same framework, not necessarily guiding within that journey. I love what you said earlier on about using it as a tool between sessions, kind of supporting in those situations where you cannot be present necessarily. Although I guess there is an argument to also remember and to learn that there are times when you do need to be alone. There maybe shouldn't always be. And this is something that most of these questions I have literally zero answers to. But one of the favorite questions that I've received about like therapy and AI is that we should actually sometimes still be okay being uncomfortable, not having someone answer, not getting that support necessarily, which now you always can, literally. Like you literally
Yes.
always have someone you can go talk to. Uh,
Yes. This
and
is
how does that impact us?
It's huge, Maria. This is a really important point. So, when uncertainty is high in our brains, like when we have a high level of uncertainty about a certain specific circumstance or life in general, we are looking for certainty. We are like searching like for some sort of certainty to help really calm that anxiety. And so then along comes these chatbots they're going to give you certainty and they're going to give you a lot of it and they're going to give it to you all the time. So we kind of latch on and then there's this certainty that gets created that can definitely be a false certainty if the AI is kind of looping into something that is not based in reality. But that is one way that people are trying to assuage their own kind of angst about the world, about their own lives, about these really deep, big, meaningful questions. And the chatbot, is people can hook onto this to try and feel like they have more certainty in their life. And I think that this idea of silence and solitude and learning to raise our comfort level with discomfort is one of the best ways to build resilience, to build distress tolerance, to build self regulation. All of these things come when we become comfortable with uncertainty. And so instead of coming in and squashing the uncertainty with a bit of a pseudo balm, if you will, let's look at the uncertainty and let's bring a level of being okay with the gray, okay with the nuance, okay with a life that can have some inherent existential angst. And yet that's something in common that every human experiences. And so let's join together in that as opposed to try and really squash it with maybe a short-sighted or somewhat superficial response.
Yeah. And oh, I love that. I'm just thinking about like and you mentioned a few of these already, but what would you say are the human skills that we need to train and get better at in order to kind of combat the impacts of AI. Because again, these are not things that we consciously choose. No one's like, oh, I really don't want to be more resilient. I want to become dependent on this thing. Like no one thinks that, right? What are the elements of human life that you would recommend that everyone and anyone entering in this age of AI really like doubles down on in order to stay human and stay resilient and make the best of it?
Oh, yeah. So many things here. I think that first of all, it's really important when we're looking at distress tolerance, which is going to help us with our self-regulation and help us with, that discomfort with uncertainty, that there's very practical things that we can be doing here. If you're experiencing a lot of kind of, this distress, doing kind of basic grounding exercises. I'll give you a few examples, going outside and walking barefoot in the grass, just being in nature, even looking at nature. Let's say you don't have access to nature. The studies have shown just pulling up a picture of like your favorite nature scene and staring at it is really good. Some of the other skills that we need to be learning are kind of our relational skills, things like patience and negotiation and, compromise with others, because you really can't get on in life without having those. And so I think that we have ample opportunity to practice that anytime we're with other human beings. In terms of like we're always needing patience and all of this, but I think that if we form too deep of attachments or too intense, prolonged attachments with AI emotionally, some of these skills could atrophy over time. And, I think about the generations, our kids and their kids, and will their relational muscles be kind of fundamentally different than ours because they are AI native, or because, they grew up with a companion kind of as a normal thing, an AI companion. And so I think it's really getting back to the hard work, I like to say the labor of love, of relationships, bearing burdens with one another. None of this is kind of the glamorous thing. None of it is the easy thing. But there's some richness to be had when we forge those types of relationships.
No, for sure. And it's actually reminded me of when you say like all of these human skills sound so like difficult, like it's also challenging. What are the best parts about AI? What are the most positive elements that you see?
I mean, I think there's some cool technological breakthroughs when we kind of remove the idea of using it for just mental health support in a chatbot way. But, I read an article about there's some specific advancement for people who are blind in helping their kind of, guide sticks operate better with AI. And I was like, that, that, let's go, like, yes, like, let's build things that are actually helping people function better. I think that AI is working on kind of some major breakthroughs in terms of pharmaceuticals or kind of medicines that can help some of these diseases that we're still, trying to sort through. So I think that's a great use for AI. And then again, I do think that there's some administrative support that it can help with, as long as we're not totally offloading our cognitive processing to it. And my hope is that when we build it ethically, when we build it with guidelines and guardrails, there are some really cool ways that this can enhance society on an individual and collective level.
Amazing. So as we're coming to a close, I would love to hear the one question that you wish everyone was asking from themselves.
Our question would be, are you aware of what you are offloading to AI? And are you okay if that particular skill atrophies within the next 3 to 6 months? Are you okay offloading it if you knew that in 6 months you wouldn't really be able to do that task anymore because it wouldn't kind of be part of your routine of the way that you exercise your cognitive faculties. Yeah, that might be the question.
I love that. And it reminded me of if someone told me that I would never be able to remember a phone number again, would I have stopped remembering them and recording them on my phone? I probably would have still done it. Not a skill I was very sad to lose,
Now,
but I
makes you
love that
think
question.
it's like, let's be realistic that this can be very helpful in some ways, but larger things we don't want to offload. But we have, I think, 2 phone numbers memorized. That's it.
Exactly. No, I absolutely love that question. It's such a good one to go away with. I'm literally gonna think about it probably all evening. Amazing. Thank you so much, Rachel. This was really incredible. And anyone and everyone should definitely follow you on LinkedIn. I love reading your posts. I love seeing the podcast. So many interesting topics and conversations. Thank you so much for joining. Is there anything that you'd kind of love to leave people?
Just that I love connecting about this and talking about it. So please feel free to reach out. I'm sure Madia is going to link my LinkedIn and my website are the best ways to get in touch with me. So I just say, reach out. Let's all kind of collectively further this conversation.
Exactly. Yes, let's do it. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining. We have more episodes coming with very different guests. I love, love, love this one. And the conversation keeps going. Thank you.
Thank you.